Heart and Feather by Twin Tribes is comprised of 4 different sections, and across those 4 sections we're going to cover 3 different guitar parts along with the lead synth melody that I've transcribed for guitar. Before jumping in, I want to give a shout out to my Patreons over on Patreon, because it's your support that allows me to be able to create this content to share across these platforms. Thank you. I truly appreciate you and your support. If you're looking for tabs for Heart and Feather, you can locate them on my Patreon along with various other transcriptions, including more Twin Tribes content. They can be accessed by either becoming a paid member or as individual purchases on my feed and within my shop. There's a link to my Patreon in my bio, in the description of this video, and in the comments of this video. An important note to make regarding my transcription of Heart and Feather is that the capo is not reflective of 0. The reason being is that I believe when we're playing across a significant amount of the fretboard that it's easier to identify and label the capo for the fret that it actually is, as opposed to us having to do additional mental math to compensate. As always, we'll be subbing out rhythms and picking amounts for language. 1 hit will be bean, 2 hits will be taco, 3 hits will be burrito, 4 hits will be quesadilla, when and where applicable. The methodology behind this approach is that it allows us to integrate speed and cue transitions with more fluidity. We're in the key of C sharp minor with the capo at the 2nd fret, and in true Twin Tribes form, virtually everything that we're going to be doing is going to be in 2-measure phrases. And of course, it's paramount for us to keep track of where the pulse is at, so that way we can play on the upbeats. The intro, the verses, and parts of the interludes are all comprised of the same exact riff, so by learning one section, we double down on our time and learn multiple. We'll be starting this with a C sharp minor bar chord. Our index finger is going to be barring at the 9th fret. Again, the capo is not reflective of 0, so we can just use our last dot prior to the double dot for reference. But our index finger is barred across the 9th fret, and then our ring finger is playing our root from the 4th string, our C sharp. So we're only going to end up hitting the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings, and we'll omit the 1st string altogether. All of these sections are only comprised of C sharp minor. However, we will have a couple of embellishments that will occur on the 2nd string. We are going to have our G sharp, which is the 5th of this chord, on the 9th fret, which is being played by your bar. We will add in the flat 6, our A, on the 10th fret, and then B, our flat 7, on the 12th fret of that 2nd string. But all of these are just adding more flavor to that C sharp minor chord. The first measure starts with straight 8s across the entire 4 beats. So we're going to start this with 1 and 2 and we're going to go from the 4th string down to the 3rd, down to the 2nd, back up to the 4th. And it'll be quesadilla for a grouping of 4. And then right after we go through 1 and 2 and, that's when we go to our B, our 12th fret, our 12th fret on that 2nd string. And we're going to go from the 2nd string up to the 4th, and then on the and of 4, we're going to catch our middle finger on that A on that of that 2nd string. So all together in that first measure, we're going to have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Or with a language concept, quesadilla burrito 2. So the idea being that each one of these embellishments is getting their own mini figure. After we catch our middle finger on that 2nd string, we're going to come in on the and of 1, but we are also going to descend like we did from that B. So we're going to hit that and of 4 with our middle finger on that 10th fret of the 2nd string, and then we're going to come down to the 3rd, then the 4th, and then with the bar, we're going to grab that 9th fret on that 2nd string, that G sharp. So as we come in on the and of 1, it'll be 1 and 2 and this and of 2 is where your index finger is going to hit. So that way we can come in on the and of 3 for the next group, 3 and 4 and to finish this phrase, we're going to go from the 3rd string to the 4th, back to the 3rd string. Now as we come in off the and of 1 on that 3rd string, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We'll be maintaining the bar the entire way, so that way these pitches can really ring out against one another, and we can get that really beautiful sustain as much as we can. And just so we can hear everything together, it'll be 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and then we quesadilla burrito 2 taco 1 and repeat quesadilla burrito 2 taco 1 then one more 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The interludes are the most straight up part of this entire song because we have something that's probably very familiar to a lot of us in a power chord. We're going to power chord our index finger at the 4th fret of this 5th string, and then your ring finger is going to go to the 6th fret of the 4th string. And if you would prefer to think of the capo as 0, say in this position, it makes a lot of sense because you're really close to what would be open. But in any event, you're at the 4th fret, the 6th fret, and then this is our C sharp, and then with any power chord, your ring finger, or whichever finger you like, is playing the 5th, and then this is G sharp. And then we're gonna add that same pinky to A. The same A natural that we played up here at the 10th fret is what your pinky is playing here on the 7th fret of that 4th string. So we're playing the same exact notes from the same exact chord, just with a different voicing and with a different kind of feel. So as we move through this, each one of these fingers, each one of these pitches, these notes, these frets are all going to get 2 hits each. And as we start moving through this, you can either alternate or you can downstroke. And for reference, Luis downpicks this entire thing. So player's poison, if you want to alternate it, if you want to downstroke it, it's totally up to you. But he does downstroke everything, and it'll be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We'll go from your index to your ring to your pinky back to your ring, and then that's the entire thing. He's gonna loop that 4 times in a row. So when we start moving through this, the big part is keeping your pulse consistent each time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and taco, 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 and then 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and taco, taco. And the main riff that we played from the intro and the verses is also included in this interlude. You could also think of that part as, say, like a pre-chorus. I like to think of it as an interlude because of what happens later when this interlude comes back, but nonetheless, you're going to go right back into that same figure that we had played from the verses. And a way that you can transition from position A to position B is that your ring finger is already on the 4th string, just like it was on the 4th string when you were playing that C sharp. So if we keep our ring finger down, we can use a guide finger to get from point A to point B, which is something that we use in art music all the time. So the more that you can see this finger distance from your index to your ring finger, as you shift this up and you get to that 11th fret, it is the same exact distance, including your pinky, because your pinky is on the fret that's directly to the right of where your ring finger is at. So in terms of sequential fingering, as in 1, 2, 3, 4, each one of your fingers gets their own assigned fret. It is the same distance from here to here. So if we're having trouble transitioning from one spot to the next one, try moving from the power chord to the bar chord and then just pushing through, so that way you can see the shapes connect. choruses are the densest part of this entire song. However, if we start examining the compositional devices that are being employed, we can take something that's semi-complicated musically and turn it into something that's fairly simple on guitar. And it'll also allow us to view a little bit more closely how Twin Tribes ends up using these techniques within a lot of the songs across their catalog. The chorus is still utilizing 2-bar phrases. However, here we're going to be implementing a rhythmic sequence, which essentially just means that for each of these 2 bars across the 8 bars that comprise this chorus, we're going to have the same rhythm copied and pasted from phrase to phrase. There is one distinction to make, and it's in the very first phrase that begins every single chorus. However, we're going to put that to the side and come back to it and focus on the rhythmic sequence itself. We're going to use that same exact C sharp minor bar chord at the 9th fret that we had from the intro, the verses, and parts of those interludes in this chorus too. And this is going to comprise of half the chorus. So we're going to maintain this bar at the 9th fret for 4 bars or 2 phrases. And as we start this, the main thing to see is how we're going to go from your ring to the 2nd string back to the ring, and that'll be the 4th string to the 2nd string back to the 4th string, and this is going to punch in off the and of 1. It'll be 1 and 2 and 1 3 1 3 in regards to our fingers, our digits. 1 and 2 and, or 1 burrito. And then right after we come in off the and of 1 and we cross 1 and 2 and 3 4, we're going to grab that same exact A that we hit from earlier to embellish that C sharp minor chord, and then we're going to go to G sharp from the 10th fret to the 9th fret with the same 2 digits that we did it earlier with, our 2 and our 1, our middle and then our index. So we're going to have 1 and 2 and 3 4. But then to conclude this, we're going to come in right on our downbeat, right on 1, with the same exact 1 and 2 and 3 and the same exact notes, but now this time we're going to have 1 and 2 and 3 and now when our middle hits, it's going to be on the and of 2, and then your index is going to hit on the and of 3, and then that'll set you up to grab your ring finger on the and of 4. So all these chords are going to end up changing on the and of 4. And for the first 2 chords, the first 4 bars, the first half of this chorus, it's not a big deal because you're not changing position, but we'll see why that's a bigger factor as we start to transition into the last 2 chords. But as we piece that together, it'll be 1 2 3 4 1 and 2 and 3 4 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Or if we're using the language concept, it'll be 1 2 3 4 1 burrito 2 1 burrito 2 1 third. Now luckily for us, we will end up using the same exact C sharp minor bar chord at that 9th fret with our index finger and your ring finger grabbing that root, the C sharp, on the 4th string, 11th fret. And all we really have to account for are the slight changes in embellishment, which is only one. Instead of grabbing our middle finger on the 10th fret for that A, the flat 6, we're going to be going up to our pinky to that B on the 12th fret of that 2nd string, which is that flat 7. So we will have the same exact picking pattern, the same exact rhythm, the same exact string set, but now just using that B instead of that A, which will sound like this. 1 2 3 4 1 and 2 and 3 4 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But as we were saying earlier, the biggest player in all of this is getting our chords to transition on the and of 4, because they're not going to move on 1. They'll all move on the and of 4. However, before branching off into the second half of this chorus, a few harmonic implications to consider if we are interested in the composition techniques, or we're trying to incorporate this kind of stuff into our own playing and our own writing, or we just are generally interested in how they're putting things together, is that when he kicks off that chorus and he's playing that C sharp minor chord, the bass is playing the same exact root. He's playing a C sharp as well. So reinforces the tonic. And then when he goes to the second chord, the second phrase, which in guitar land looks like a C sharp minor 7, but he, as a bass player, goes down to an F sharp. So one way that one could interpret this is that it's an F sharp minor chord, except you don't have the third, which makes it a minor chord. You have this B, and it gives us a sus4 sound. I don't think they're thinking about it that deeply, though. I think what's more likely the case is that the guitar part or the bass part was brought to the table, and then the other person jams to it, and then they come up with their part. So if it was the guitarist first, if it was Luis first, that had these two C sharp minor chords for the first 4 bars, for the first 2 phrases, and then the bass line got added to it after, or vice versa, that's a different story. They could be thinking about it in a more complex way, but it's hard to differentiate if that is the case or not. There is something that happens in Cauldron of Thorns where, when I discuss this in the breakdown in the lesson that I did for that song, where it's, I believe, the second phrase where the bass line goes down to an F, but then the guitar chord is still playing an A minor chord, which creates an F major 7 chord. And I don't think that they were thinking, oh, well, the bass line is going to an F, so let me play an upper structure triad, and then let me invert that so that way the 7th is at the root. I think it was probably an A minor chord for those 2 phrases, and then the bass line got added, and then that F, that 6th degree, which is a hallmark of the post-punk and dark wave genre, was thrown in and added for flavor, and it sounded excellent. I think that's what really happened. However, I'm totally open to being wrong. You never know if these cats were really planning and plotting this stuff out so that way it's rhythmically complex and harmonically rich. Nonetheless, the most important thing is that we move on the and of 4. So once we get over here, our middle finger is going to be on the 6th fret of that 4th string, our G sharp. We're going to have the 2nd fret where the capo is at on the 3rd string, index finger at the 5th fret of that 2nd string, and then the open, the 2nd fret of that 1st string too. A few different ways to look at this. It could be an A major 7 chord with the 7th in the root. You could look at it as a C shape, where if the root is playing the 7th fret on the 5th string, it's E. You can look at it as an E major chord. I think these are all viable options, viable arguments, but nonetheless, we still have that rhythmic sequence, which means that all that we have to do is compensate for the string set within this chord voicing. So when we come in on the and of 1, we're gonna hit 1 and 2 and this is gonna be from the 4th to the 3rd, back to the 4th, and then we're gonna hit the 2nd to the 1st strings. And that'll be all the strings that we're gonna hit. So with that rhythm pattern that we had from the first 2 phrases, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that sets us up for the very last chord. Again, you can look at this last chord in a handful of different ways. It can be an A major chord. It can be a C sharp minor chord, depending on what you're thinking. If it's an A major chord, it's an inversion with the C sharp, the 3rd in the root. And then we have E, the 5th, back to C sharp. But it can also be a C sharp minor 6, another hallmark of the post-punk and dark wave genres like we were talking about earlier. However, here, the rhythm sequence does all the heavy lifting for us once again, and all we have to do is compensate for the string set within this chord voicing. So we'll be going from the 5th string to the 3rd string, 2nd fret, back to the 5th string, 4th fret. So coming in off the and of 1, 1 and 2 and then with which either digit you would like. I use my ring finger, but you can also use your middle finger to grab the 5th fret on the 2nd string. And then we are gonna hit the 5th fret and then let go, so that way we can use the 2nd fret where the capo is already clamping on that 2nd string. So with that rhythm sequence here, it'll be 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and now the only difference is when we hit the and to 4 on the last chord, we're not changing our chord on the and to 4. We are hitting that second fret one more time. And the reason is because that second fret is C sharp, which is the same exact C sharp that you play with your ring finger on the 4th string when you repeat this entire progression, this entire section. So really brilliant writing, very, very smooth, very beautiful to go from the octave on the 2nd string down to the 4th string. And this is where one can politic on if they're, like, how deep their composition is going with how they're planning this. I'm sure these cats have brilliant ears and their playing and writing is very eloquent, but a lot of this I think comes down to just straight jamming and feeling out what serves that song the best and then how they can get from point A to point B with the least amount of struggle possible, but also something that gives more of a backbone to what they're doing. So these little things like this octave transition are hidden in plain sight. As we conclude this section, we must go back to the past for something that we mentioned earlier. Godfather did it, Jedi did it, now we must go back to the past as well. When we start and kick off that chorus, there is one slight difference in that rhythmic sequence. So when we start that chorus, we'll hit the 11th fret to come in on the downbeat on 1 twice. It'll be 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and everything else is going to be the same. So essentially, the only differentiation that we have from that rhythmic sequence is the very first measure that begins these choruses, that begin these sections, because right when we end up cycling it back and we go back to the beginning of the chorus, we come in on the end of 1 anyways. And thus, the only time that we come in on the downbeat of 1 is when we introduce the chorus. I do make one alteration in my tone when I'm playing this synth lead, and it's that I add a little bit of dirt. My gain is turned all the way down to make it as transparent as possible though. Something that I'm always talking about regarding transcribing other instruments to guitar, be it voice, sax, cello, trumpet, whatever, is that I'm trying to maintain and keep the tonal integrity as much as I possibly can. And to me, the easiest way that I can accomplish that is keeping string skipping to a minimum. So with this line, I have it all on the 2nd string. However, you can play this in a multitude of different areas should you like, especially because once again, it is not on guitar. It's a synth melody that once you find the notes and once you know what they are, you can play them anywhere that you choose. We'll be going from the 9th fret, this G sharp, up to our 17th fret, our E, and then we're gonna drop back to our 14th fret, which is your C sharp, and each of these 3 notes, 1, 2, 3, are all on beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and after you hit these on beats, everything else is gonna be on the end of what we're gonna end up doing. So we'll hit 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and we're gonna go back to the 12th fret, and then we're gonna hit the 14th fret once again, and then we're gonna go to A, and then back to this G sharp. So all together, it'll be 9, 17, 14, 12, 14, 10, 9, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. There are also a bunch of different ways that you can finger this too, but I like legato when I'm transcribing something like this from a synth lead to guitar, because I feel like I'm merging the two worlds, so that way it sounds like a lead guitar line. One last idea is that you can keep this entire thing in this 9th fret position, which is a multitude of different things. This is minor pentatonic box number 1. This is where we would kick off a 3-note per string run with your root on the 6th string with your index finger, position 1. There's a ton of different ways that one can look at this, but you can keep it all here if you don't care about string skipping or trying to keep tone consistent, or things that might seem pedantic or just minute to one. But if you were wanting to play it here, you could do the same 9th fret that we started all this with on the 2nd string, and then we can go up to our 12th fret on that 1st string, and then we would go to our index finger on the 9th fret, that same exact C sharp, E to C sharp, and then we would have B, the same B that we've been kicking this entire time, back up to that C sharp, and then we would have a G sharp. Player's poison. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to check out my content. If you like this video, give it a like, leave me some feedback in the comments. I tend to respond to virtually everything that I see in the comments because I love having a discourse with anybody that's into the same things that I'm into. Even if you're not into it, I'm still down to have a discussion. And I love Twin Tribes, I love teaching, and I love teaching Twin Tribes. And this is not the kind of stuff that I normally get to teach within my regular agenda. So I really value being able to do this and share this for people that are truly interested in it. Thank you again for your time, and enjoy your day.